May 18th, 1940. The northern plains of Belgium. Dawn arrives not with birdsong, but with a low mechanical growl of diesel engines churning through farmland still wet with morning dew. The air tastes of oil and turned earth. In the distance, smoke rises from the village of Honut, where 2 days prior, French armor clashed with German panzers in what would become the largest tank battle the world had yet witnessed. The roads are choked with refugees, farmers clutching bundles of clothing, mothers carrying infants, old men leading horses by frayed ropes. They move west, always west, away from the advancing shadow of the Wehrmacht. Above them, the sky is a pale, cloudless blue, the kind of sky that belongs to a day of peace. But there is no peace here. Not anymore. On a narrow country road flanked by hedgerows and irrigation ditches, a single vehicle sits idling. It is not a tank. It is not even a proper armored vehicle by the standards of the Panzer divisions now sweeping to the Low Countries. It is a Panhard AMD 178, a French armor reconnaissance car no larger than a civilian automobile, its hull barely thicker than a man's thumb, its turret crowned with single 25mm cannon and one 7.5mm rival machine gun. 4 wheels. No tracks. A crew of 4 men crammed inside a space smaller than a phone booth. This machine was never meant to fight tanks. It was meant to scout, to observe, to report, and to flee. Yet on this morning, it does not flee. It cannot. Behind it, the road is clogged with refugees. Ahead, the earth trembles with the approach of something far more terrible. The commander, Lieutenant Henri Belot, a thin man with wire-rimmed spectacles and callous hands, leans out of the turret hatch and watches the horizon. He does not speak. There is nothing left to say. His driver, Corporal Gaston Dupuis, a baker's son from Lyon, taps his fingers against the steering wheel in nervous rhythm. The gunner, Private Emile Roche, a coal miner from the Ardennes, checks the belt feed on the machine gun for the 3rd time in as many minutes. The loader, young Private André Moreau, barely 19 years old, clutches a single photograph of his mother and whispers a prayer he learned as a child. They are ordinary men. They did not ask for this moment, but the moment has found them nonetheless. Then, through the morning haze, they appear. First 1, then 3, then a dozen. Panzer IIIs and Panzer IVs, their gray hulls slick with mud, their commanders standing tall in open hatches, their cannon barrels swinging lazily from side to side like the heads of hunting beasts. Behind them, half-tracks carrying infantry. Behind those, supply trucks and motorcycles. An entire mechanized column, a steel serpent winding its way through the Belgian countryside. Unstoppable, inevitable. The vanguard of Blitzkrieg. The iron fist of the Third Reich. Lieutenant Belot does not give the order to retreat. He gives the order to load. The machine gun begins to sing. To understand this moment, one must first understand the machine. The Panhard AMD 178 was born not from ambition, but from compromise. Designed in the mid-1930s, it was intended to be fast, maneuverable, and cheap, a vehicle that could be mass-produced and deployed across the sprawling colonial holdings of the French Empire. It weighed just over 8 tons. Its armor, at its thickest point, was 20 millimeters, enough to stop rifle fire and shrapnel, but not much else. Its 25 millimeters cannon, though capable of penetrating light armor at close range, was a pop gun compared to the 75 millimeters guns mounted on the Panzer IVs now bearing down on the Belgian road. The machine gun, a rival 7.5 millimeters model, was designed for suppressing infantry, not engaging armored vehicles. In every measurable way, the Panhard was outclassed, outgunned, and outnumbered, but it had 2 advantages. The first was speed. With a top speed of 72 km per hour on paved roads, the Panhard could outrun almost anything the Germans fielded in 1940. The second was its crew. French reconnaissance units, though often overlooked in histories dominated by tales of Maginot Line failures and panic retreats, were among the best-trained soldiers in the French army. They were taught to think independently, to exploit terrain, to strike and disappear. They were not expected to hold ground. They were expected to survive. On the morning of May 18th, survival was no longer an option. The German column had been advancing for 3 days without meaningful resistance. The French First Army, shattered and disorganized after the fall of Sedan, was in full retreat. The British Expeditionary Force was pulling back toward Dunkirk. The Belgians, oh brave, were collapsing under the weight of the Wehrmacht's mechanized onslaught. Entire divisions had ceased to exist. Command structures had dissolved. Roads were clogged with the debris of a broken nation. Into this chaos, the Panzer divisions moved like sharks through shallow water, swift and merciless. The German tank commanders expected no resistance on this particular road. Why would they? They had encountered nothing but fleeing infantry and abandoned equipment for days. Their maps showed the route clear. Intelligence reports indicated no French armor in the area. The war, as far as they were concerned, was already won. France would fall within weeks. Paris would burn. The Wehrmacht would parade down the Champs-Élysées, and the world would tremble. This was the promise of Blitzkrieg. This was the doctrine of lightning war. Speed, shock, overwhelming force. The enemy would break before the first shot was even fired. But the Panhard did not break. It fired first. The sound of a machine gun is not the crack of a rifle or the boom of a cannon. It is a rhythmic hammering, a mechanical heartbeat, a steady thud, 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 thud that echoes across the fields. Private Roche, the gunner, does not aim for the tanks themselves. He knows his bullets will not penetrate their armor. Instead, he aims for the commanders standing in their turret hatches, for the infantry clinging to the sides of half-tracks, for the motorcyclists racing ahead of the column. His first burst catches a German officer in the chest. The man crumples backward into his tank, disappearing from view. The second burst rakes across a half-track, sending infantry scrambling for cover. The third burst punches through the windshield of a lead motorcycle, and the vehicle careens into a ditch. The German column halts, not because it is afraid, not because it is damaged, but because it is surprised. For 3 days, the Wehrmacht has encountered nothing but chaos and cowardice. French soldiers surrendering en masse. British troops fleeing toward the coast. Belgian civilians weeping in the streets. The narrative of German invincibility has been reinforced with every kilometer gained, every village captured, every enemy routed. And now, on this insignificant stretch of road, a single armored car, a vehicle that should have fled the moment the Panzers appeared, has opened fire. It is not a tactical decision. It is an insult. It is defiance in the face of inevitability. The German response is immediate. The lead Panzer swivels its turret, and its 37mm cannon barks once. The shell screams over the Panhard's turret, missing by inches, and detonates in a hedgerow 50 meters behind. Dirt and shredded foliage rain down. Lieutenant Belot does not flinch. He shouts an order, and Corporal Dupuy throws the Panhard into reverse. The wheels spinning wildly, the engine howling. The little car lurches backward, off the road, into the cover of a shallow ditch lined with trees. The machine gun never stops firing. Another Panzer fires. Then another. The road erupts in explosions. Smoke and dust fill the air. Refugees scream and scatter, diving into fields, abandoning their belongings, running for their lives. The German column, designed for swift, overwhelming assault, grinds to a halt. Tank commanders shout orders. Infantry dismount. Half-track spread out, trying to flank the unseen enemy. But the Panhard is already gone, racing 50 meters down the ditch, repositioning behind a cluster of apple trees. The machine gun opens up again, this time from a different angle. More infantry fall. A German lieutenant, trying to coordinate the advance, takes a round to the shoulder and collapses. The Germans expected a rout. They received a fight eye in the turret of the Panhard. The air is thick with cordite smoke and the acrid stench of spent brass casings. The interior is so cramped that the 4 men can barely move without elbowing one another. The engine roars beneath them, a deafening cacophony that makes communication nearly impossible. Lieutenant Belot shouts orders, but his crew reads his intentions more from hand gestures and words. Private Moreau, the loader, feeds ammunition belts into machine gun with shaking hands. His fingers are bleeding, cut on the sharp edges of the metal links. But he does not stop. Private Roche, the gunner, squints through the narrow vision slit. His eye pressed so close to the metal that it will leave a bruise. Corporal Dupuy grips the steering wheel like a man clinging to a life raft in a storm. They do not speak of fear. They do not speak of death. They speak only of the next shot, the next position, the next few seconds of survival. Outside, the German column reorganizes. Officers bark orders. Tank crews reload. Infantry spreads out in a skirmish line, moving cautiously through the fields, rifles at the ready. The Panzers, no longer racing forward in unchallenged arrogance, now advance slowly, deliberately, hull down behind embankments, covering one another's movements. This is no longer Blitzkrieg. This is siege warfare, compressed into a few hundred meters of Belgian farmland. And it is all because of one tiny armor car that refuses to die. The Panhard moves again. This time, it races along a muddy farm track, parallel to the road, hidden from view by a stone wall. Lieutenant Belot has chosen his ground carefully. The terrain here is bisected by drainage ditches and irrigation canals, remnants of centuries-old agricultural engineering. The Panzers, heavy and wide, cannot maneuver easily off the road without risking bogging down in the soft earth. The half-tracks can move cross-country, but slowly, and they are vulnerable to machine gun fire. The Panhard, light and nimble, darts between obstacles like a rabbit pursued by wolves. It stops. It fires. It moves. Stop. Fire. Move. A deadly game of hide-and-seek. A Panzer IV, frustrated by the inability to bring its main gun to bear, opens fire with hull-mounted machine gun. Tracer rounds arc through the air, bright orange streaks against the pale sky. They chew through the stone wall, sending chips of rock spinning like shrapnel. One round punches through the Panhard's rear fender. Another ricochets off the turret with a deafening clang. Inside, Private Moreau screams, not in pain but in shock. Lieutenant Belot grabs him by the shoulder, shakes him once hard, and the boy swallows his fear. The machine gun keeps firing. Minutes stretch into hours. The sun climbs higher. The refugees, those who have not yet fled, huddle in barns and cellars, listening to the thunder of battle. Some pray, some weep, some simply sit in silence, numb with terror. On the road, the German column remains stalled. Commanders confer over radios. Engineers are summoned to clear obstacles. Infantry pushes forward, meter by meter, flushing hedgerows and searching ditches. But the Panhard is always elsewhere, always one step ahead, always firing. By the third hour, the Germans are no longer surprised. They are enraged. In the doctrine of Blitzkrieg, time is the most precious resource. Speed is not merely an advantage. It is the entire strategy. The Wehrmacht's success in Poland, in Denmark, in Norway, and now in France has been predicated on one simple principle. Move faster than the enemy can react. Bypass strong points. Ignore flanks. Drive deep into the rear. Sever communications. Create panic. The enemy will collapse not because they are defeated, but because they are disoriented. But Blitzkrieg cannot function if the column stops. Every minute lost is a minute the enemy can use to regroup, to reinforce, to counterattack. Every kilometer not gained is a crack in the armor of inevitability. And so, for 3 hours, one Panhard armored car, crewed by 4 ordinary men, does what entire French divisions have failed to do. It imposes delay. It creates friction. It reminds the Germans that this war is not yet over. The German tank commanders, trained in the theories of Heinz, Guderian, and Erich von Manstein, understand this better than anyone. They do not see the Panhard as a threat. It cannot destroy their tanks, cannot halt their advance, cannot change the outcome of the campaign, but it can waste their time. And time, in war, is blood. Orders crackle over the radios. The Panzer column splits. Half continues down the road, pushing forward despite the harassment. The other half wheels off into the fields, engines roaring, tracks churning through the soft earth, determined to encircle and crush the irritating French crew. Artillery is called in. Mortars begin to fall, walking slowly across the fields in search of the elusive target. The noose tightens. Lieutenant Belot knows the end is near. He does not need to see a map to understand that his options are vanishing. The road behind is now swarming with German infantry. The fields to either side are filling with Panzers. The sky above is beginning to buzz with a distant drone of Stuka-Die bombers, drawn by the sound of combat. The Panhard's ammunition is running low. The engine is overheating. The left rear wheel is damaged, wobbling on its axle. The machine gun barrel is so hot it glows faintly in the dim interior of the turret. But still, Lieutenant Belat does not retreat. Not yet. Not while there are still refugees on the road. Not while there is still a chance to buy them one more minute, one more kilometer. He whispers something to his crew. Words lost to history, unrecorded by any document, remembered by no witness. But whatever he says, the three men nod. They understand. They do not argue. Private Roche swings a machine gun toward a cluster of German infantry advancing through a wheat field. He fires. The soldiers scatter, diving to the ground. Corporal Dupuy guns the engine one more time, and the Panhard lurches forward, crashing through a wooden fence, racing toward a small grove of trees. They are almost there when the shell hits the... IT is a glancing blow, not a direct impact. The Panzer IV 75mm round strikes the ground 2 meters in front of the Panhard and detonates on contact. The blast wave lifts the front of the car, flipping it onto its side. Metal shrieks. Glass shatters. The world tumbles. When the dust settles, the Panhard is on its side in the mud, one wheel still spinning uselessly, smoke pouring from the engine compartment. The machine gun has gone silent. German infantry approaches cautiously, rifles raised, expecting a trap. They have learned, over the past 3 hours, that these Frenchmen do not surrender easily. But there is no trap. The turret hatch opens and Lieutenant Belat emerges, his face smeared with blood and oil. He raises his hands. Corporal Dupuy follows, limping, his leg twisted at an unnatural angle. Private Roche is dragged out by 2 German soldiers, unconscious but breathing. Private Moreau, the youngest, is helped out last. His hands are still bleeding. He is still clutching the photograph of his mother. The German officer who takes their surrender is a captain, a veteran of the Polish campaign, a professional soldier who has seen enough war to recognize courage when he encounters it. He does not mock them. He does not gloat. He orders his medic to tend to their wounds. He offers Lieutenant Belat a cigarette, which the Frenchman accepts with a nod of thanks. For a moment, the 2 men stand together in the wreckage of the battlefield, enemies bound by the strange eternity of combat. The captain asks, in broken French, why they did not retreat, why they chose to fight a battle they could not win. Lieutenant Belat takes a long drag on the cigarette, exhales slowly, and looks back down the road, where the last of the refugees are disappearing into the distance. Because, he says, someone had to. The captain nods. He understands. He does not agree. He is a soldier of the Reich, a believer in the superiority of German arms and the inevitability of German victory. But he understands. War is not always about winning. Sometimes it is simply about refusing to lose. The Panhard is left where it fell. The German column, delayed but not defeated, continues its advance. The 4 French crewmen are loaded onto a truck and driven east toward prisoner-of-war camps in Germany, where they will spend the next 5 years. They will survive the war. They will return home. But they will never speak much of this day. Some wounds are too deep for words. In the years that followed, the story of the Panhard on the Belgian road faded into obscurity. It was not recorded in official histories. No medals were awarded. No monuments were erected. The French army, humiliated by the speed and totality of its defeat in 1940, had little interest in celebrating small acts of defiance that did nothing to change the outcome. The Germans, victorious and triumphant, saw no reason to dwell on minor delays. The refugees, scattered across Europe, carried a memory as a fragment of a nightmare they desperately wanted to forget. But the story survived. In the years after the war, a Belgian farmer, tending his fields, discovered the rusted hulk of the Panhard still lying in the ditch where it fell. He mentioned it to a neighbor, who mentioned it to a journalist, who wrote a brief article in a local newspaper. A French veteran, reading the article, recognized the date and location. He wrote to the newspaper, identifying himself as Corporal Gaston Dupuy, the driver. Others came forward. Slowly, piece by piece, the story was reconstructed. What emerged was not a tale of victory, but something more profound. It was a story about the nature of courage. Not the kind celebrated in propaganda films, not the kind that wins wars, but the kind that persists even in the face of certain defeat. The Panhard crew did not stop the German advance. They did not save France. They did not change history. But for 3 hours on a forgotten road in Belgium, they reminded the world that resistance is not measured by success, but by the refusal to submit. The machine gun, that single rival 7.5 millimeters weapon, became in those 3 hours a symbol larger than itself. It was not a weapon of war, but a statement of will. Every round it fired was a rejection of inevitability. Every burst was a declaration that freedom, however fragile, however doomed, was worth defending. The Germans had tanks, artillery, air support, and the might of the most powerful military machine in Europe. The French had 4 men and a machine gun, and for 3 hours, the machine gun held. There is a photograph, taken sometime in 1942, of the 4 crewmen in a POW camp in Silesia. They are standing in a line, gaunt and hollow-eyed, wearing threadbare uniforms. But they're alive. Private Moreau, the youngest, is in the center, his hands no longer bleeding but scarred with white lines. Corporal Dupuy leans on a makeshift crutch, his leg never having healed properly. Private Roche stands with his arms crossed, his face expressionless. Lieutenant Ballot at the end of the line still wears his wire-rimmed spectacles, though one lens is cracked. They do not smile, but there is something in their eyes, not pride, exactly, but a quiet recognition. They know what they did. They know it did not matter in the grand scheme of the war, but they also know that it mattered to them, and to the refugees who made it another kilometer down the road, and to every soldier who has ever had to choose between fleeing and standing, between surviving and fighting, between accepting defeat and spitting in its face. When the war ended, the Panhard was recovered by a French military salvage team and transported to a depot in Lyon. It was too damaged to restore, too insignificant to preserve. It was cut apart for scrap, its metal melted down, and reformed into civilian goods, pots, tools, nails. The machine gun, its barrel warped and ruined, was thrown into a furnace. Nothing of the vehicle survived, but the story did. It passed from veteran to veteran, from father to son, from historian to reader. It became a parable, a reminder that heroism is not always grand. Sometimes it is simply 4 men in a cramped steel box, doing what needs to be done, for as long as they can, because no one else will. The machine gun fires. The panzers advance. The refugees flee. These are the rhythms of war, ancient and unchanging. But in between the great movements of armies and the sweeping narratives of campaigns, there are moments, small, fragile, easily forgotten, where individual human beings make choices that define them. The choice to stand when you could run. The choice to fight when you could surrender. The choice to impose delay, even knowing it will cost you everything, because someone has to. On May 18, 1940, on a nameless road in Belgium, 4 men made that choice. They did not win. They did not even survive intact. But they held. For 3 hours, against impossible odds, they held. And in those 3 hours, they proved something that no amount of Panzer divisions or Blitzkrieg doctrine could ever erase. That courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite it. That resistance is not futile simply because it does not succeed. That freedom, democracy, and human dignity are worth defending, even when the cause seems lost. The machine gun is gone. The Panhard is gone. The men are gone. But the echo of that machine gun, firing steadily into morning light, refusing to be silenced, refusing surrender, that echo remains. It speaks across the decades, a voice from the rubble of a broken world, reminding us that the fight is never over as long as someone is willing to stand, and that sometimes one machine gun is enough, because someone had to, and they did.